This is Listen Lakeland, the show that keeps you up to date on all things happening in and around the Lakeland area. Here's your chance to plan your family activities and learn more about what your city government and your neighbors are doing to make Lakeland a great place to live, work, and play.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us for the July edition of the Listen Lakeland Show, a show highlighting people, places, activities, and organizations that make our community an exceptional place to call home. I'm Kyle Fedler with Lakeland Vision. Today's show is all about bicycle riding in and around Lakeland. So Lakeland is officially designated as a bike-friendly community, and like many other cities, has experienced a real boom in bicycling throughout the coronavirus pandemic. So in this edition of Listen Lakeland, we'll hear from two Lakelanders that are looking to make cycling more accessible, safe, and fun for the whole community. Dr. Mary Crowe, president of Bicycling in Lakeland, and Ted Hogan, leader of Pedal Power Ministries. And I will briefly discuss a new mountain biking league in Lakeland for kids of all riding abilities from 6th to 12th grade. So Mary, let us begin with you. Can you just let our listeners know a little bit about yourself? What do you do? How long have you been in Lakeland?
Sure. So my name is Mary Crowe, and I'm a professor of biology at Florida Southern College. My husband and I have lived in Lakeland for 9 years, almost going on a decade, which seems kind of inconceivable at this point in time. And have found Lakeland to be a really great community to live in. And part of that is because it's so open and accommodating to cyclists.
Great. So as I mentioned before, you are the president of Bicycling in Lakeland. So can you tell us a little bit about Bicycling in Lakeland, its mission, how it got started, what your involvement is?
So Bicycling in Lakeland is a nonprofit that has no staff members. Everybody that's involved in Bicycling in Lakeland is a volunteer. And we started it about 5 or 6 years ago because it seemed like Lakeland didn't have an advocacy group. So Bicycling in Lakeland is about advocacy and education, and we're committed to making Lakeland a safe place for all cyclists. And so we do a lot of, prior to the COVID, we did a lot of programming related to what should you do if you get hit by a car? So what sorts of things might a cyclist want to do immediately after that? How do you go about commuting safely? What are some things, tips from avid, people who are commuting by bike? What tips could they share so that others might decide they want to try commuting by bike? We did a lot of education of new cycling laws, things related to legislation that was being proposed, community discussion forums about what's missing from the legislation and what others would like to see happen. And so a lot related to educating the public about safe cycling, and then also working with the city of Lakeland and Polk County and FDOT related to cycling facilities.
So you mentioned both the kind of safety and kind of advocacy and education. So can you talk to our listeners, some of whom may be fairly new to riding? What are some kind of safety tips for cycle riders? I often see some out there without helmets or riding the wrong way. So maybe if you could just tell us a little bit about what Bicycling in Lakeland recommends for safety for cyclists.
So my first tip for folks is that you should always wear a helmet. A helmet's not going to stop you from getting hit, but it can potentially lessen the impact of if somebody is to get into an accident on a bicycle. And of course, helmets are required for kids under the age of 16 and lower. So kids have to wear helmets. Adults, they leave it to our discretion.
So it's a state law that children under 16 have to wear a helmet?
Yeah, it's a state law. One of the things that I would suggest is always to communicate with drivers of motorized vehicles and with pedestrians. And what I mean by that is you can convey a lot by looking and waving your arms and pointing. Those are all things that folks can be. You want to be seen, you want to be visible, and you want to communicate what it is you're doing, where it is you're going. And if you need to turn, let's say if you need to get into the lane of traffic, I have found that if I put my left arm out and I point to the left, and then I look back behind me, cars will slow down and let me come in because I don't have a signal on my car, but I do have an arm. And so communicating your intentions is one of the most important things to do as a cyclist. The other thing is, I always say, is to be a defensive rider. So the assumption is that no one else is looking out for you except you looking out for yourself. And so I'm always scanning the environment to look to see if someone is going to be, maybe they passed me and they're going to make a right-hand turn. And so I may adjust my speed, I may slow down so that they can make that right-hand turn, and I'm not necessarily in their lane. And so those are some, I guess, some kind of quick safety tips about being defensive, being aware, being seen. Make sure that you have on light colored clothing, and if you're cycling early in the morning or at dawn or dusk, that you have lights. And so these are actually laws. There are Florida state laws that require you to have a tail light and a headlight so that you are visible to drivers. And so our motto is kind of be seen and be safe.
Yeah, I've seen even more riders, myself included, who are using lights even during the day. Just day running lights to give drivers and pedestrians a little bit more awareness.
Yeah, there are a number of kind of tail lights that are out there that are rechargeable with a USB port. And a lot of people will have them on kind of flashing so that anything that's going to grab a driver's attention, that you're there and visible, anything like that helps. And you're right, a lot more people are riding with lights on during the day. So that's another good safety tip.
Yeah, I appreciate your advice about awareness. And so I've also heard that, advice not to wear headphones while you're riding. I know it's enjoyable to ride around with headphones, but it's one less sense that is available for you to anticipate cars behind you, et cetera.
Yeah, another tip that I'll give is, even though cyclists have, I guess we could ride on any road we wanted to, you won't see me riding my bike on South Florida Avenue. You will see me taking what we call them one-off roads. And what I mean by that is, when I was commuting by bike, I was looking for roads that were maybe one-off, that were parallel to busy roads, but then have very little traffic. And so a great example of that is New York Avenue, which runs north and south into downtown Lakeland. So it's literally one block west of South Florida, but the amount of traffic on it is minuscule compared to what's on South Florida. And so there are ways and routes that you can get in and around Lakeland and commute by where you're not encountering a lot of traffic. And it just may be that you just have to skirt your route, one block in either direction, and you'll encounter a lot fewer cars than on major roads.
That's good advice, and I'm going to turn to Ted in just one second. One other thing that you mentioned, Dr. Crowe, is about bike commuting. And do you have any advice? Do you commute by bike?
So right now I'm working virtually, but when I was working in the office, I did commute by bike. And one of the things that I did is I took a drawer in my office so that I had clothes to change into when I got to work. And so some people don't have any type of shower facilities, and that's where having wet wipes is a really good thing. I mean, you don't necessarily have to clean up. You can clean up in a sink, in a bathroom, but you can also just use wet wipes. And then I would have clothes in the drawer that I would change into. And once a week, I would kind of bring in a whole bunch of all my meals, like all my yogurts and things like that. Once a week, I would load those in what's a pannier or a big sack on my bike and bring them in and leave them in the refrigerator. And so I kind of would plan for a given week. There'd be one day that I might commute by car, that I would also bring stuff in, so that way I wasn't having to take a whole bunch of stuff back and forth by bike.
Excellent. Great advice. Thank you. So, Ted, can you, as I asked Dr. Crowe before, can you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your history with Lakeland?
Well, thank you for inviting me here today, Dr. Fedler. I really appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Ted Hogan, and I'm recently retired from Grasslands Golf and Country Club where I was the superintendent for 8 years, and prior to that, spending 30 years in corporate America.
And I know that you're real involved with Pedal Power, and some of our listeners may be familiar with that ministry, that program. But can you tell us a little bit about it? How did it get started, and what do you do?
Absolutely, yes. Pedal Power Bicycle Ministry is a nonprofit organization strictly run by volunteers in this community to serve those that have fallen on hard times with free bicycles. That would include children and adults, all shapes, all sizes, and all kinds of bicycles, free of charge.
And where did the bicycles come from?
I'm glad you asked that, because in the number of years that we've been doing it, we started in 2008, and how it started was my wife and I were on our way home from church, Christmas Eve, and our neighbor was putting a bicycle out in the trash, and I stopped and I said, "Hey, are you throwing that away?" And he said, "Yes, we got my son a new bicycle." I said, "Well, we're thinking about starting a bicycle ministry to serve children and adults in need with used bicycles." And the neighbor said, "Well, gosh, if you can use it, go ahead and take it." So that's how it started, with one bicycle. I fixed one bicycle in my garage, and then from there we met with our local pastor at the church, at First Presbyterian Church, explained what we thought we wanted to do and our mission to serve children and adults who had fallen on hard times. And he said, "Ted," he said, "if it's in your mind and if it's in your heart," he said, "go for it." So as a result of that meeting, we put together an 8.5 by 11 one-page flyer, displayed it in the church, and within the very first week, I got a number of calls, but one of those calls came from the Children's Baptist Home here in Florida over on Sykes Boulevard. Mm-hmm. And they said, Ted, I understand you're starting a bicycle ministry. Are you interested in bikes? And I said, "Yes." "How many do you have?" And he says, 40. So we went from one bicycle to 40 bicycles within a matter of a week. So that created a problem at the church because we had no place to work on them. So the church staff went to work, and they just have done a phenomenal job since day one when we started this ministry. They provided us with two 14 by 12 sheds, and we loaded stuff in. We built the shop there. We loaded stuff in. We loaded stuff out as we met once a week. And then as the ministry progressed a number of years, about 6 years ago, we were broken into, and everything was stolen. All of the tools up across the board, our air compressor, our truing stand, our spokes, some bicycles, actually to the tune of about $7,000 worth of the equipment. So at that point, the media got a hold of it, and we did a story on all of the local television stations, including Tampa. And at that point, Kyle, this ministry blew up and exploded. We now not only serve local people, we serve folks as far away as Orlando Prison Ministry. We serve the St. Peter Cleaver Ministry over in Orlando, the Joshua House in Tampa. And going back to your question, I'm not beating around the bush, but going back to your question of where do these bikes come from, everything has been donated. And over the past years, we have increased and had some significant relationships, and those relationships have continued to flourish. One of those relationships is the Marriott Corporation. The Marriott Corporation donates bicycles to us from their beach bike rental program. I know a fella over where I worked and said, he came to me, goes to our church and said, "Ted, would you like some bicycles?" And I said, "Yeah, how many do you have?" And he said, "Well, let's put it this way. I have more bicycles than you have room for." Anyway, long story short, he called me and said, "Ted, I've got good news and I have bad news. The good news is I've got you 174 bicycles.
Wow.
The bad news is they're in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. So I said, no problem. I got in contact with the chief executive officer at Saddle Creek Logistics, and they, out of the goodness of their heart, sent a 53-foot tractor trailer to Hilton Head Island and picked up 174 bikes and brought them back here to Lakeland. Phenomenal. They did it all gratis.
You started with one bike on Christmas Eve, and now Saddleback, Marriott Corporation, all of these folks have joined in. That's just, so I assume many of the bikes come in disrepair, need some upgrades, or from small to large. How does that happen?
Yeah, they come in all shapes, all sizes. We've never turned away any donation or any contribution whatsoever, but a lot of the beach bicycles obviously have been used in and around the salt water, so we'll go through that entire bicycle with the lower bearings, the steering bearings, as well as the rear bearings in the rear wheel. Sometimes you have to replace the pedals, but these bicycles that are being donated by the Marriott Corporation are the perfect bicycle for the population that we serve, the non-for-profit and the homeless people. Because it's a single-speed bicycle, it's got a big, wide, very comfortable seat on it, coaster brakes, big, wide handlebars. And when we know that we're donating a bicycle to someone in need for sole transportation, or we know that they're using it for job purposes, we also equip that bicycle with lights on the front and the back. As Dr. Crowe said, it's a law in Lakeland if you're riding your bike after dark. So when those folks leave the Pedal Power Bicycle Ministry shop, they're well equipped and they're safe and they're good to go. And we also give them a bicycle lock. We've got phenomenal support from Florida Southern College. The cross-country team has come down a number of times and helped us out volunteering. The Southeastern University baseball team has been there. The Southeastern University wrestling team has been there. The other thing that this ministry is doing things that we never, ever imagined. I have high school kids coming and earning community service volunteer hours. And it's also building generational relationships. I have one gentleman that brings his grandson every single month, which we meet on the third Saturday from 9 until noon.
I think I'm probably like some listeners and thought, that the ministry was really about getting, bicycles under Christmas trees for kids. But it sounds like what you're doing is providing, opportunities for folks who have no other transportation. Can you talk about the impact that might have for some of these folks?
Absolutely, yes. We were proud to receive the 2019 Program of the Year from the Florida Bicycling Association. And bicycles, to the population that we serve, it's more than a bicycle, maybe for what you and I and Dr. Crowe think of as a bicycle. We look at it as a piece of recreational equipment to go out and enjoy ourselves, to go and grab an ice cream with our kids. But to a lot of these people that we serve, it is their source of transportation. With the cost of insurance now, some people are losing their cars during the pandemic. We've got a lot of requests, for bicycles specifically for job purposes. And to those people, it's their lifeline, just like the car is your lifeline or my lifeline. But to them, it's more than just a bicycle. It is their way of getting around, to do groceries, to get to and from a job.
And how does the ministry decide who gets a bike? Is there an application process? Do you get referrals from other nonprofit organizations? How does that work?
Yeah, we do. We get referrals from agencies. As a matter of fact, last year during the pandemic, and as I say, everything was donated. Last year, we gave away 283 bikes to 19 different agencies and 83 different individuals. Some of the agencies that we serve would include Anchors in the Storm, the Dream Center, the Polk County Farm Migrant Workers, the Mulberry Migrant Workers, the Haley Center over in Winter Haven, Heartland Home for Children, St. Peter Cleaver Prison Ministry, the Talbot House, Lighthouse Ministries, the Mulberry Farm Workers, the Anchor House, and the list goes on and on and on. And we're so proud of what we do, and we're so blessed, and we're so thankful for this community and everything that it does in supporting of safe cycling in Lakeland.
Well, it sounds like you really tapped a need with that many organizations coming to you. And so you mentioned the community support for this, and I know that First Presbyterian has been very supportive. If someone wanted to get involved, in addition to donating a bike, how else might they be able to support Pedal Power?
Yeah, we meet the third Saturday of every month at the church, and we have an incredible, we never used to meet during the summer because we always would be outside and it would be so darn hot we couldn't work. But now we're inside the church working in air conditioning, all LED lights. I've got a 42-foot long workbench that's built, 160 rubberized hooks to put all of our finished bikes. Everything that we finish, and once we give it the stamp of approval for safe riding, it goes into a computer, into our inventory, and is assigned an asset tag. And then when we give that bicycle away, we assign it to the individual or an agency. But yeah, we meet the third Saturday of every month from 9 to noon. If someone is interested, if someone has skills, that's great. You don't necessarily have to have skills to work, because there's a lot of cleaning up on a bicycle. We degrease the bicycle, we derust the bicycle, and everybody works together. You don't necessarily have to be a member of the church. We've got volunteers from all over, as I mentioned earlier. And we're so thankful and we're so blessed for all of the support that this ministry has received and continues to receive.
And for those who are not aware, First Presbyterian Church is located on Lake Hollingsworth, right on the lake there. And so hope folks and people could also contact. I know there's a Facebook page as well that they can find some information. Well, it sounds like, again, there's, as I mentioned before, just a kind of boom in cycling throughout the nation. Sometimes it's even hard to find bikes in local shops. But with that growth of cycling elsewhere, Dr. Crowe, what advice would you give to drivers? There's, I've certainly seen more bicyclists out on the road, families, young people, older folks. What advice would you give to drivers when when they see a cyclist?
So I think one of the things is to pay attention. And most importantly, right now in the state of Florida, there's a law that says you have to give 3 feet to pass a cyclist. And if you've ever stood on a train platform, let's say in DC or New York City or Chicago, waiting to catch one of their trains, you know how when you stand close to where the train's going to be coming by, you can feel that air, right? 3 feet's not a lot of space. And you have to remember that the people who are on bikes are somebody's loved one, right? There's somebody's daughter, husband, son, right? You name it, they've got somebody that loves them. And so I think the first thing that I would encourage all drivers to do is to change lanes to pass a cyclist. Mm-hmm. Yes, technically you only have to give us 3 feet when you go to pass us, but I would also encourage you to think about things can happen, right? So, there might be a cyclist who's riding in front of you that all of a sudden comes across a patch of glass.
A pothole
or a hole or something like that. And so they might end up being a little wobbly or lose control of their bike. And if you only gave 3 feet to pass, that might impact that. But if you change lanes, much like you're required to do for vulnerable users, so like if you see police officers or first responders at a scene, there's a law that says you have to change lanes to pass those folks. I would encourage drivers to also pass cyclists by getting into the other lane. The other thing I want to remind folks, when you're in a car, and this has happened to me before, many of the intersections are not set up to recognize cyclists when you come to a light. And so I can be a cyclist and I can come to an intersection that many cyclists go through, but that intersection is not, the light doesn't pick up a cyclist. And so as you're going to cross the road, and if you're waiting at the light and no cars come, you can't go because there's nothing in the light to detect you as a cyclist and to make the light change. And so sometimes we will go through a red light if there's no traffic coming in either direction, knowing that we're not going to activate the light. And so sometimes cyclists get a bad reputation because they went through a red light. And part of that's because we can't trigger the light, especially at the and there are many intersections that not only do not pick up cyclists on their bike, but they don't have the signals where you can
crosswalk buttons,
yeah, to stop it. And so, you know, please don't judge us harshly, right, by the actions of just a few, but also just recognize that we are trying to do our best to go out. Maybe somebody's, you know, using their bike to commute and they can't wait for a car to come up behind them to trigger the light.
Yeah. And I think law recently too, which is very important, many of the accidents that have happened between pedestrians and cyclists with cars as a result of distracted drivers, people texting on their phones, et cetera. So I would just encourage folks, it's, you know, there's no text that's more important, and a cyclist can come up on you pretty quickly. A reminder for cyclists out there as well, we always ride with traffic. And so if you see somebody riding against traffic, they're not doing it correctly, and in fact, they're violating the law. Can I throw it to maybe Ted and Mary, either of you? So what are some things that the city could do or has done to make cycling more accessible, more safe? Again, we got the bike. I've seen increasing bike designated lanes. Those are wonderful to have, especially on some of the major thoroughfares. Are there other things that you'd like to see the city doing?
So Ted, I'm going to jump in really quick. So I think the city is doing a lot, truth be told. I think Lakeland itself is pretty proactive when it comes to cyclists. And the city recognizes that there are a number of roads that have dedicated bike lanes on them, but they don't connect very well. And so the city is exploring and looking for ways to connect things in different areas. So a great example is they're exploring the creation of a multi-use trail that would run on the west side of Lake Hunter. And what that would do is that would connect with the dedicated cyclo track, right? Because right now the dedicated cyclo track connects with Main Street. There are bike lanes on Main Street, but there's nothing south of the cyclo track. And so by putting in a new multi-use path on the side of Lake Hunter, on the west side of Lake Hunter, people could make their way to and from downtown Lakeland, you know, on a dedicated path separated from traffic. Because a lot of families and a lot of individuals do not feel safe riding in the road with traffic. There are many of us who do, but a lot of folks don't. The other thing that's going to do is Wabash Avenue is eventually going to be extended all the way up to I-4. And then Wabash will then come straight down and exit out at the Lakeside Village. And in the building of that road, there will be dedicated bike lanes there. And so the city is doing what it can with respect to, you know, trying to retrofit and to connect a whole bunch of different areas that haven't been connected in support of people being able to move in and around the city by bike.
And again, that could be particularly important for the folks, Ted, that you're serving, people who are not simply, you know, wanting to go for a recreational bike ride, but they need to get around town to and from jobs, to and from groceries, et cetera. You can find out more about our local league as part of the National League. You can get more information by visiting the Florida League's website at floridamtb.org, or visit any of your local shops, which can put you in touch with one of us. So I'd like to just close by thanking our guests. I very much appreciate the work that you're doing to make cycling more accessible and safe in our community. And just remind our listeners that Listen Lakeland is brought to you as a collaborative project between Lakeland Vision, the City of Lakeland, and Hall Communications. Truly a community working together to provide an exceptional quality of life. Thank you.